I don't need drugs to hallucinate. I can just lie in bed, close my eyes, and then at some point things happen in front of my eyes because the visual part of my brain is so well trained, you know. So I don't need drugs at all. I do drink too much wine, I have to admit that. But that's for another show, for the Oprah Winfrey show, maybe.
I'm so bored of living. I wake up every morning in the same bed, I get dressed, and I eat the same breakfast and then take the same commute to work. I'm 28 years old and I'm terrified this is all there is. Dad. Is this a dream?
Well, partly.
I just feel like everyone's messing with me. You're acting even stranger than usual.
It's about a woman who comes out of a coma and then she discovers that she has abilities to manipulate time and bend the rules of the universe. And at the same time, her parents think and her family think that she's schizophrenic. My take on it was that if we would animate it, if we would ask animators to animate it, you would get a typical animation kind of acting, you know. And animation kind of acting is, most of it is pretty big, like physical acting. And these lines in the script of Undone were very subtle and very realistic. And there was a lot of subtext, a lot of meaning in between the lines. So what I pitched to the writers and the showrunners and the producers was to use this technique called rotoscoping. Rotoscoping means that you film the actors first. In our case, we film them in green screen studios, so we don't have any surroundings. It's just the actors playing with each other as if they're in a play. I mean, a set looks like Dogville, you know, from Lars von Trier, where there's just tape on the ground. There's nothing there. They're just acting. And then what we do, once we lock the edit, once we have edited an episode, we have a line animation of the characters. And I think because it's so painterly and because it's always a bit almost real but never really real, it kind of plays with your mind. And I think a lot of people get into this dreamy state where they're not sure what's going on and they're completely surprised all the time by what's going on.
Research had recently come out showing that people with schizophrenia, like my mother, they have large ventricles.
Oh, sexy.
Ventricles are the central pockets of fluid in the brain.
I know. What's sexier than big pockets of fluid?
So,
right?
Okay, I got to thinking maybe mystics and priestesses and shamans, maybe they also have larger ventricles. Maybe their abilities come from a specific brain structure.
And what'd you find?
Well, I found it's very hard to convince holy people to let me scan their brains.
So, no connection?
Well, actually, the few that did let me scan them had larger brain pockets.
Huh.
It's very similar, actually, to the old Disney films like Bambi. Those are the films that are the biggest inspiration for me. Bambi actually also has oil paintings as backgrounds. So if you have a character in Undone, for instance, and the character is talking and walking, etc., the background often stays still. And those backgrounds are all made with oil paint on canvas. So they're about this big, like 1.5 meter big. And I think for the 2 seasons, about 1,500 oil paintings were made. Yeah. So we have a team of 8 oil painters. They're all classically trained. They're very good painters. And they spend about 3 to 5 days for each painting. It actually really comes from the 17th century Dutch painters, and it's called wet on wet, or alla prima. It's a very fast way of painting, the way Rembrandt painted, or you know. anyone until the start of the 20th century. We paint all separate elements like a door or a wall or a chair, and it's being projected on that 3D space. And that on itself is not super modern. I mean, it happens in a lot of productions, but it has never been done with oil paint. So we're combining this very old technique, like 500-year-old technique, with very modern 3D animation. And that gives that very, I would say, warm and lively atmosphere of Undone.
Gotcha. Yes, gotcha.
I started smoking weed when I was 12. I'm from Amsterdam, you know how it goes here. And that was fun at first, but when we were 15, we had 30 plants ourselves with huge tubs, so we were smoking all day long from 9:30 in the morning till the night, and at some point that turned into a psychosis. It was very dark. I had very dark times, and life seemed like a nightmare sometimes. And so that was a horrible period, but later on I could draw a lot of inspiration from that. So I combined that horrible time, which is and it comes back in Undone. I mean, Undone is also in a way about psychosis, about being delusional. So it always comes back in my films. I made all these clay heads from all the characters, and I put a screw here so I could move them from all positions on a tripod and then film them, and then I could put lights on it for the shading. And making all the shadows in the computer, drawing them in the computer, took me 2 years of my life actually. And it was super boring work, but it was so boring that I could listen to TED Talks and other lectures, and I became really smart.
Living in a dusty place, living in a dusty place, breathing in a southern waste, taking all our toys away.
Gutman is the director of Montage of Heck. He approached me because he had tapes from Kurt Cobain where he was telling stories and making sound collages, but it was like 8 minutes long and there was no images with it. It was just sound, it was on a cassette tape. So he needed animation to do something visually with it. And when he saw my film Junkyard, he felt that it had the same kind of rough energy and the darkness and the gloominess that Kurt Cobain had. And the stories that Kurt Cobain told were about his teenage years. So when I heard it, it was like, oh, this sounds like every film that I've ever done. It's smoking weed, getting late, or, friends to hang out with, doing mischief. It was almost like Junkyard, actually.
It turned out that pot didn't help me escape my troubles too well anymore, and I was actually enjoying doing rebellious things like stealing booze and busting store windows, and nothing ever mattered. I decided within the next month I'll not sit on my roof and think about jumping, but I'll actually kill myself. And I wasn't going out of this world without actually knowing what it was like to get laid.
Animation is used here also to show his inner world. And I think that works very well. And I think that makes the film more personal than when you would just see him in old footage. You just see, suddenly you hear his voice as a 20-year-old. And you see, well, it's not really his imagination because we played with it. But still, it's more or less like a made-up story. And it's very much, you really get to know him in a different way than when you would just see footage.
Whoa.
You see what you're capable of?
Yeah, but this is a dream reality. Anything can happen in a dream.
Yeah, well, when you're awake, you're in a physical-based reality, so it seems more real than a daydream or a dream, but those states are just as real. As your abilities continue to grow, these states will continue to blend. You'll have a more flexible, fluid reality.
I think I'm already finding that.